He crossed a line with me. My husband's reaction shocked everyone. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, torn between my loyalty to my husband and the unsettling reality of what had just happened. But life has a way of throwing you into moments you never saw coming, moments that force you to question everything you thought you knew about trust, respect, and even yourself. It all started on a cool autumn evening, the kind where the air was crisp enough to send a pleasant shiver down your spine but not quite cold enough to require a heavy coat. The sky outside was an inky canvas speckled with distant stars, and the golden glow of our dining room cast a warm contrast against the approaching night. Daniel, my husband, had invited a few colleagues over for dinner. It wasn't unusual. He had worked at his firm for nearly 2 decades, and over time, I had come to know many of his co-workers well. Some had become more than acquaintances, people with whom I'd exchange holiday cards and share polite small talk at company events. But one of them, Julian, was different. From the very beginning, there was something about Julian. He had joined the firm about a year ago, younger than Daniel, perhaps in his early 40s, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that was impossible to ignore. There was an ease about him, a natural charisma that made people laugh a little louder, lean in a little closer, feel a little more seen. I had always admired how effortlessly he could navigate a conversation. He had a way of making every exchange feel like an inside joke, every compliment sound like a secret meant just for you. It was subtle, harmless, at least, that's what I had always told myself. That night, I had spent most of the afternoon preparing. The house was spotless, the dining table set with our best dinnerware, and the kitchen was filled with the rich scent of rosemary and garlic from the roasted chicken slowly crisping in the oven. A soft classical melody played from the speakers, setting the ambience. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for Daniel but for the guests who would soon walk through our front door. When they arrived, the house buzzed with laughter and conversation. Daniel was in his element, effortlessly charming as he poured drinks and recounted office anecdotes that had his colleagues chuckling. I moved through the crowd like I always did, making sure everyone had what they needed, exchanging pleasantries, refilling wine glasses. Julian arrived a little later than the others, stepping in with his usual effortless confidence, a bottle of red wine in one hand and a smile that could disarm even the wariest of strangers. "Hope I'm not too late to the party," he said, his voice smooth as he extended the bottle toward me. His fingers brushed over mine, just for a second, maybe 2, but there was something deliberate about the way his touch lingered, like the aftershock of a whisper you can still feel on your skin. A flicker of unease tightened in my stomach, but I ignored it, pushing the feeling away as quickly as it had come. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. The evening carried on, drinks flowed, and the conversations grew livelier. Daniel was deep in discussion with his boss about an upcoming project, his voice filled with excitement, while I found myself caught in conversation with Julian. At first, it was harmless, just the usual back and forth about work, life, and the kind of polite exchanges that came naturally at these gatherings. But then his words shifted, subtly at first. "You know, Olivia," he said, swirling his drink in his glass, "Daniel is a lucky man." I let out a small, polite laugh, brushing off the compliment. "Well, I like to think I'm lucky too." His eyes lingered on me a beat too long. "If I were him, I don't think I'd ever leave your side." Something inside me tensed. I smiled, trying to keep the conversation light. "I think he feels the same way." But Julian wasn't backing down. His voice was smooth, deliberate. "Good. A woman like you shouldn't ever feel overlooked." I swallowed, my fingers tightening around my wine glass. Was I imagining this? Had the wine softened the edges of his words, making them seem bolder than they actually were? Or was this exactly what it seemed, an intentional step over a line that should never be crossed? I shifted in my seat, searching for Daniel in the crowd, but he was still engaged in conversation, laughing with his boss, completely unaware of the shift happening just a few feet away. As the night continued, the comments kept coming, not overt, not obvious, but calculated in a way that made my stomach twist. A touch on my arm that lingered just a second too long. A glance that felt heavier than it should have. A whispered remark, just close enough that his breath brushed against my skin, sending an unwanted shiver down my spine. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe Julian was just naturally charming, and I was reading too much into his words. But as the night wound down and the last of the guests began to leave, Julian stayed behind, lingering just a little longer than necessary. "It was nice spending time with you tonight," he murmured, his voice lower now, his expression unreadable. "I hope we get to do this again. Maybe just the two of us sometime." For a split second, I couldn't breathe. I wasn't sure I had heard him correctly, but the look in his eyes, the slight smirk at the corner of his lips, told me I had. Before I could say anything, Daniel appeared at my side, clapping Julian on the back. "Glad you could make it, buddy. Drive safe." Julian only smiled, his eyes flickering back to mine for one last lingering glance before he turned and walked out the door. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. Had that really just happened? Daniel locked up for the night, his tone light and unaware. "That went well, don't you think? Everyone seemed to have a good time." I forced a smile. Yeah, it was a good night. But as I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, the events of the evening replayed in my mind, each moment sharper, clearer. The lingering touches. The whispered words. The way Julian had looked at me, as if he knew a secret I wasn't ready to admit. Something had shifted that night. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled the house, mingling with the faint, smoky aroma of candle wax. The soft flicker of the flames cast golden hues on the walls, their gentle glow making everything feel warmer, more intimate. The table was perfectly set, white linen napkins, polished silverware, delicate wine glasses waiting to be filled. It was the kind of evening I had always loved, an opportunity to create something beautiful, something welcoming. Daniel was in his element, laughing and chatting with his colleagues, his voice carrying over the hum of conversation. He had always been good at this, holding court, making people feel at ease. I watched him from across the room, his face animated as he recounted a story about a business deal that nearly fell through. The people around him laughed at all the right moments, their admiration evident. And I, like always, played the role of the gracious host. I moved through the space with practiced ease, topping off drinks, ensuring everyone had what they needed, smiling in that effortless way I had perfected over the years. It was second nature by now, a part of who I was. Then the doorbell rang. Julian arrived late, stepping in with his usual self-assured air. A bottle of wine dangled from his fingers, a half-smile curving his lips. "Hope I'm not too late to the party," he said, his voice smooth, almost lazy, as he handed me the wine. His fingers brushed mine. It was a small thing, a seemingly insignificant touch, but it lingered. Just a little longer than it should have. A moment stretched too thin, his skin warm against mine, his thumb grazing the inside of my wrist before he finally let go. A current of unease rippled through me. I forced a smile, ignored the way my stomach tensed, and turned toward the kitchen, using the excuse of finding a corkscrew to put some distance between us. It was nothing. At least, that's what I told myself. The game begins. Dinner unfolded in a comfortable rhythm, the clinking of silverware against plates, the murmur of conversation filling the air. Wine flowed freely, loosening the edges of the night, making everything feel softer. I tried not to pay attention to Julian, but it was impossible not to notice him. The way he listened, really listened, when I spoke, his gaze never straying, as if I were the most fascinating thing in the room. The way his laughter came just a little too easily at my jokes, his body angling toward mine in subtle, unspoken alignment. It wasn't overt, nothing anyone else would pick up on. But I felt it. A quiet tension humming beneath the surface. And then there were the touches. Barely their moments, his hand grazing my back as he passed behind me, his fingers ghosting over my wrist when I handed him a dish. Each one calculated, deliberate, designed to be forgettable yet unforgettable. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, that the flicker of something unspoken in his gaze was nothing more than a trick of the candlelight. But when our eyes met across the table, the air between us thickened, and I knew. This wasn't in my head. A slow unraveling. As the night stretched on, guests began to drift toward the living room, settling into comfortable clusters. Daniel was deep in conversation with his boss, his focus entirely elsewhere. Julian found me near the kitchen, his glass of wine half full, his expression unreadable. "You look beautiful tonight, Olivia." It was said so casually, so effortlessly, that it would have been easy to brush off. But there was something in his tone, a quiet reverence, a weight beneath the words that made my breath catch. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the dish towel in my hands. "That's kind of you to say." He tilted his head slightly, his lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Is it?" I swallowed. "Julian. I'm just making an observation," he said smoothly, stepping closer. Too close. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, woodsy, expensive, intoxicating. "Daniel's right there," I whispered, my pulse skittering. Julian's gaze flicked toward the living room, toward my husband, then back to me. "He's not paying attention." I took a step back, but my back hit the counter, leaving me trapped between cold marble and something far more dangerous. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He was testing me. Pushing. Seeing how far he could go. And the worst part? A part of me wasn't entirely sure I wanted him to stop. A fractured reality. I finally managed to step away, muttering an excuse about checking on the dessert. My hands trembled as I reached for the plates, my breath unsteady. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. I had been married for over 15 years. Daniel was a good man. We had a good life. So why was my heart still racing? Why did I still feel the ghost of Julian's touch on my skin? I forced myself to focus, to gather the plates, to breathe. By the time I re-entered the living room, Julian was back in the center of the group, laughing at something one of Daniel's colleagues had said. As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just set something into motion that I wasn't sure I knew how to stop. An unspoken threat. The night wound down, guests filtering out one by one. Julian was the last to leave. I stood at the doorway, my fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of the door, willing him to just walk away. But of course, he didn't. He paused, his gaze locking onto mine, his expression unreadable. "I meant what I said earlier," he murmured, voice low. "You really do look beautiful tonight." A beat of silence stretched between us, heavy, charged. Then, as if sensing my hesitation, he reached out, just the barest movement, a whisper of a touch against my hand. A touch that lingered. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoing through the empty house. And I stood there, breathless, my world tilting dangerously beneath my feet. Shadows of doubt. That night, as I lay beside Daniel, staring up at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraled. I told myself I was imagining things. That Julian was just being friendly. That I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a spark. And if I wasn't careful, it was going to burn. The night wore on, and the atmosphere in the house took on that familiar, intoxicating looseness that came with a steady flow of wine and laughter. Conversations ebbed and flowed like waves, rising in pockets of excited chatter before sinking into quieter, more intimate exchanges. Daniel, ever the consummate host, had settled into a deep discussion with his boss, their heads bent toward each other as they discussed the details of an upcoming project. His voice was steady, self-assured, his laughter genuine as he clinked glasses with his colleagues. And I was caught in a moment I desperately wished I could escape. Julian stood too close, his presence wrapping around me like an uninvited whisper. His dark eyes, always brimming with amusement, held something else tonight, something heavier, something that sent a prickle of unease down my spine. "You know, Lily," he said, his voice a quiet murmur that barely rose above the clatter of glasses, "I have to say, Daniel is a lucky man." I laughed lightly, the sound forced. "Well, I'd like to think I'm lucky too." Julian's lips curved, but his eyes remained locked onto mine, unwavering. "If I were him, I don't think I'd ever leave your side." There it was, that unmistakable shift. A slow unraveling of boundaries, a deliberate dance of words that threatened to tip into something more dangerous. My stomach tightened. I glanced toward Daniel, but he was too engrossed in his conversation to notice. Around us, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. I tried to force a casual smile. "That's sweet, Julian. But Daniel trusts me. And yet, trust is such a fragile thing, isn't it?" His voice was smooth, almost teasing, but there was something in his gaze, something that sent a flicker of heat crawling up my spine. I stiffened, my fingers tightening around the stem of my wine glass. He was pushing, testing the waters. I had seen this before, in the way men sometimes looked at women when they thought no one else was watching. The way they leaned in just a little too close, their words dipped in something just shy of innocent. I had spent years learning how to deflect, how to brush off comments like these with an easy laugh, a quick subject change. But this was different. This wasn't some harmless flirtation. This was calculated, dangerous. And worst of all, it was working. Because despite the unease curling in my stomach, despite the alarm bells ringing in my head, I couldn't ignore the way his words sent an unwelcome thrill skittering across my skin. The weight of a gaze. The night stretched on, but Julian didn't waver. Every time I moved, his eyes followed. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment, I felt his attention lingering like a touch that never quite landed. And the worst part? No one else noticed. To everyone else, Julian was just being Julian, charming, charismatic, effortlessly likable. But I felt the undercurrent beneath his words. The way his gaze lingered on my lips when I spoke. The way his fingers brushed against mine when I handed him a drink, lingering just a second too long. The way his presence seemed to wrap around me, suffocating and thrilling all at once. I told myself I was imagining it. That the wine had gone to my head, making me hyper-aware of something that wasn't really there. But deep down, I knew the truth. And that truth settled in my chest like a stone. The moment that changed everything. I had managed to put some distance between us, busying myself with clearing dishes from the table while the others moved toward the living room. I felt him before I saw him. That unsettling, electric awareness of being watched. I turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway of the dining room, watching me. No pretense this time. No playful words to mask his intent. Just a look. A look that sent my pulse racing. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. You should join the others. He didn't move. And miss a moment alone with you? I forced out a laugh. Julian. He stepped forward, closing the space between us in a way that made my breath hitch. You feel it too, don't you? His voice was low, intimate, threading through the air like a secret. My heart slammed against my ribs. I should have shut it down right then and there. I should have said something sharp, something final, something that would leave no room for misinterpretation. But for one brief, dangerous moment, I hesitated. And Julian saw it. A slow smile curved his lips, and he leaned in, his hand reaching out. Lily? Daniel's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Julian immediately stepped back, the mask of easy charm sliding back into place so seamlessly that I almost questioned whether I had imagined the entire thing. But my heart was still racing. And I knew better. The lie I told myself. By the time the guests had all left and the house had fallen into silence, I still hadn't shaken the weight of Julian's words, the way he had looked at me, the almost touch that still burned against my skin. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was overreacting. That nothing had really happened. But as I lay in bed beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling, I felt the shift, the fracture in the foundation of everything I had believed to be solid. Because for the first time in 15 years of marriage, I had felt something I wasn't supposed to feel. And I had no idea how to make it stop. The air inside the house still carried the warmth of the evening, traces of laughter, the clinking of glasses, the scent of candle wax and red wine lingering in the air. But beneath it all, there was something else. Something that clung to my skin like an unwanted whisper. Julian's words echoed in my mind, looping over and over as if I could somehow change what had just happened if I replayed it enough times. I hope we get to do this again, maybe just the two of us sometime. A casual phrase on the surface. But the way he had said it, the way his voice had dipped just slightly lower, his eyes holding mine just a second too long. It was anything but casual. And then he was gone. The front door shut behind him with a soft click, sealing him away from the house, but not from my thoughts. The wait of a moment. Daniel sighed contentedly beside me, stretching his arms. That went well, he said, glancing down the hall toward the dimly lit living room. I think my boss had a great time. I swallowed, forcing myself to nod. Yeah, it was a nice night. Nice. That was a lie. I felt anything but at ease. Julian's presence still clung to the space around me, like the last tendrils of smoke from a candle that had been blown out. Daniel didn't notice my tension. He kissed my forehead, his lips warm and familiar against my skin. "I'm exhausted. You coming to bed?" "In a minute," I murmured. I needed a second. A moment to let my heart settle, to tell myself I was overreacting. That Julian had been drinking. That his words were nothing more than an offhand comment, something he didn't even mean. But deep down, I knew better. The thin line between innocence and intent. I moved through the house, gathering the stray wine glasses, adjusting the chairs around the dining table, anything to distract myself from the way my hands still trembled slightly. I told myself it was ridiculous. That I had nothing to feel shaken over. That I hadn't done anything wrong. And yet, I couldn't ignore the way my body had reacted to him, the slight hitch in my breath, the racing pulse, the way my skin had warmed under the weight of his gaze. It was a dangerous reaction. One that I didn't want to acknowledge. I exhaled, pressing my palms against the cool surface of the kitchen counter, grounding myself in the stillness of the empty house. It was nothing. He was just being Julian. It won't happen again. But as I turned off the last light and made my way upstairs, I knew those were just more lies I was telling myself. A sleepless night. Daniel was already asleep when I crawled into bed beside him, his breathing slow and even. I envied his ability to slip into unconsciousness so easily, to turn off the day as if it had never happened. My mind, however, refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julian standing in the doorway, the way he had watched me, the way his fingers had lingered when he handed me his glass. The way he had spoken those words, so deliberate, so sure. I turned onto my side, staring at the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains. I should have shut him down right then and there. I should have made it clear that there was no room for misinterpretation. Instead, I had frozen. And he had seen it. Morning clarity. By the time the sun rose, I felt drained, as if I had spent the entire night running in place. I slid out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake Daniel, and padded downstairs, needing the comfort of routine. The kitchen was quiet, the early morning light spilling through the windows in soft golden streaks. I went through the motions, grinding the coffee beans, boiling the water, inhaling the rich aroma as the first drops of espresso dripped into the mug. For a moment, it almost worked. Almost. And then my phone vibrated on the counter. A simple text. From Julian. "Did you sleep well?" I stared at the screen, my pulse kicking up again. Of course he didn't mean anything by it. Of course he was just being friendly. And yet, as my fingers hovered over the keyboard, I hesitated. Because I knew. This was the moment. The moment that determined whether this would stay a harmless, forgettable interaction. Or something else. Something darker. Something irreversible. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that Julian was testing me. That he was waiting to see if I would take the bait. I could feel the weight of his presence even through the phone screen, the silent challenge in his words. "Did you sleep well?" Not "good morning." Not "hope you have a great day." Just that. Like he knew I hadn't slept. Like he wanted me to know he knew. My fingers curled around the phone, my breath coming a little too fast. I could delete it. Ignore it. Shut it down completely. Or I could respond. And that response, no matter how small, would mean something. The choice that should have been easy. I placed the phone down, walked away from it. Tried to focus on my coffee, on the steady sound of Daniel coming down the stairs. Tried to push away the nagging voice in my head that whispered, "What if?" Daniel appeared in the doorway, his hair slightly tousled, his face still carrying the softness of sleep. He smiled at me, walked over, kissed my cheek. "Morning, love." His warmth was so familiar. So safe. And yet, my heart still thudded in my chest for a reason that had nothing to do with him. I forced a smile. "Morning." I waited for the guilt to settle in. For the weight of what had almost happened, what could still happen, to crush me. But it didn't. And that terrified me more than anything else. A line crossed. I should have left my phone on the counter. I should have gone on with my day as if Julian's message had never existed. But I didn't. Later that morning, as Daniel headed out for work and I sat alone in the quiet of the house, my fingers reached for the phone before my mind could stop them. I read the message again. And then, I typed out 2 words. I did. I hit send. And in that moment, I knew. I had just crossed a line I could never uncross. Morning light streamed through the curtains, casting golden slants across the bedroom floor. The world outside was waking up, birds chirping in the crisp autumn air, the distant hum of a neighbor's car engine coming to life, the quiet rustling of leaves in the breeze. But inside, I felt anything but light. There was a strange weight pressing against my chest, an unease that clung to me like a shadow. Maybe it was the restless sleep. Or maybe it was something else, something I didn't want to name. The buzz that changed everything. I reached for my phone, still half asleep, intending to check the time. But before I could even tap the screen, it vibrated in my palm. A message. I wasn't prepared for who it was from. Julian, hey Lily, hope you're having a great day. Can't stop thinking about our conversation the other night. My stomach twisted. The words sat there, glowing on the screen like a slow-burning fuse. Can't stop thinking about our conversation the other night. The message was casual enough on the surface, but I knew better. I could still hear his voice from that night, low and deliberate, could still feel the way his eyes had lingered on me when he said maybe just the 2 of us sometime. I should have shut it down then. And I should shut it down now. The response that should have ended it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I hesitated for only a second before typing. Me, hey Julian, I think you misunderstood something. I'm happily married, and I'd appreciate it if you kept things professional. There. Clear. Direct. Final. I set my phone down, exhaling slowly. It was over. Or at least, it should have been. The message that made my skin crawl. Seconds later, the phone buzzed again. My breath caught as I glanced down. Julian, of course, Lily. I respect that. Just saying. If things were different. If things were different. If things were different. My jaw clenched, and a slow anger curled inside me. I had been polite. I had drawn a line. And yet, here he was, standing just on the edge of it, not stepping back, not walking away, just waiting. Like a predator circling its prey. Waiting for me to slip. A war in my own mind. I should have ignored it. Deleted the message. Blocked his number. I should have tossed my phone onto the kitchen counter, poured myself a cup of coffee, and gone on with my morning like it was any other day. But instead, I sat there, staring at the screen, my pulse drumming in my ears. Because the truth was, it wasn't just anger twisting inside me. It was something more dangerous. It was the fact that, for the briefest moment, a part of me had imagined it. A world where things were different. A world where I wasn't bound to my life, where I wasn't Daniel's wife, where I wasn't the perfect hostess, the ever-dutiful spouse. A world where Julian's words weren't inappropriate, where I wasn't supposed to feel guilty for the way my heart had raced when he looked at me. I hated that part of me. I wanted to silence it. But it was there. And it scared me. The danger of small choices. I set the phone down with a sharp exhale. I wouldn't respond. I had said my piece. Whatever Julian thought, whatever game he was playing, I wasn't a part of it. I wouldn't be. I grabbed my coffee mug and took a long sip, hoping the warmth would settle me. It didn't. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know. But I did. And my stomach turned. Julian, you're thinking about it too, aren't you? A slow, creeping dread spread through me. This wasn't just flirting anymore. This was something else. This was a man who wasn't just testing boundaries, he was dismantling them, piece by piece. And I had let it get this far. Drawing the final line. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had played it safe before, tried to be polite, tried to brush it off as a misunderstanding. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a man who wouldn't stop unless I made him stop. And I had to do it now. I typed quickly, my heart hammering. Me, no, Julian. I'm not thinking about it. I never was. And I need you to stop. Right now. Do not message me again. I hit send before I could hesitate. A long moment passed. No reply. I watched the screen, waiting, expecting another slick, suggestive message. But there was nothing. Just silence. It should have made me feel better. It should have been the end of it. But somehow, I knew. It wasn't. Not yet. A few days had passed since Julian's last message, and the silence that followed had been unsettling. I should have felt relieved, should have been able to put it behind me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. And I was right. The invitation I couldn't refuse. One evening, Daniel walked into the kitchen while I was preparing dinner, his expression casual, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Hey, I was talking to Julian today," he said, reaching for a bottle of water. He and his wife want to do a double date at that new steakhouse downtown. I told him we'd love to join. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Oh. Sure," I managed to say, forcing a smile. Inside, I felt like the ground beneath me had just disappeared. A double date. With Julian. The very man who had been towing the line between flirtation and outright pursuit. I wanted to say no. But how could I? What was I supposed to tell my husband? That his colleague had sent me messages that made my skin crawl? That I didn't trust his intentions? I didn't even have proof, just a gut feeling. So, like a fool, I went. And it was a nightmare. The perfect act. The moment we arrived at the restaurant, Julian was already in full performance mode. He greeted Daniel with a warm handshake, grinning like they were old college buddies. His wife, Claire, was stunning, tall, elegant, effortlessly beautiful in a way that made me feel suddenly overdressed. She had an easy grace, the kind of woman who made others feel at home in her presence. It made me wonder. Did she have any idea who her husband really was? Had she noticed the way his attention drifted? Or was she completely oblivious? Julian pulled out a chair for her like the perfect gentleman, casting me a knowing look when Daniel wasn't watching. It was subtle, but I caught it. That flicker of something smug. Something possessive. Like he was playing a game that only he and I knew about. And I hated it. The unwanted attention. Dinner was excruciating. Julian was as smooth as ever, acting as if nothing had happened between us. He laughed at Daniel's jokes, complimented Claire's choice of wine, and made just enough polite conversation with me to seem completely innocent. But I knew better. I felt it in the quick glances he stole when no one was looking. The way his foot brushed against mine under the table, lingering just long enough to make my breath hitch. The way he leaned in just a little too close whenever he spoke to me. And then, as I reached for my wine glass, his fingers lightly grazed mine. A barely there touch. A ghost of contact. But it sent a shiver down my spine. I pulled my hand back as if burned, my heart hammering in my chest. Daniel, of course, noticed nothing. He was too engaged in conversation with Claire, oblivious to the silent war happening across the table. And then, just low enough for only me to hear, Julian murmured, "You're even more beautiful when you're nervous." A cold rush of anger flooded my veins. I turned to him, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Excuse me?" He smirked, swirling his whiskey in his glass. "Relax, Lily. Just an observation." I wanted to throw my drink in his face. I wanted to stand up and tell Daniel everything. But I didn't. Because I knew that if I caused a scene, Julian would win. He would twist it, make me seem irrational, paranoid. And I wouldn't let him have that power. Cracks in the facade. Claire was talking about a recent trip they had taken to Napa Valley, her voice light and animated. "I swear, Julian has the best taste in wine. He picked out this incredible bottle, and I told him we need to stock up next time we go." I glanced at him, searching for some kind of guilt in his expression. There was none. Just that same easy charm. The same effortless deception. I wondered how many times he had done this before, how many women had fallen for his act. And I wondered if Claire had ever questioned it. If she had ever looked at him the way I was looking at him now, with suspicion gnawing at the edges of certainty. She smiled at him, touching his arm affectionately. And something in me clenched. She didn't deserve this. None of us did. The last straw. The waiter came by to clear our plates, and Daniel excused himself to use the restroom. Julian took the opportunity immediately. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I know you feel it too, Lily." I froze. Claire was right there. Sitting inches away. And yet, Julian spoke as if we were the only two people in the room. I turned to him, keeping my expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said flatly. He smirked. "You do. A hot wave of fury rolled through me. I had been polite. I had been civil. I had given him every opportunity to back off, to let this die. But he wouldn't. And I was done playing along. I sat up straighter, my voice like steel. "You're mistaken, Julian." For the first time, something in his eyes flickered. Annoyance. A crack in the carefully crafted mask. "Good." Claire turned to us, blissfully unaware. "What are we talking about?" Julian's smile returned in an instant. "Just complimenting Lily's impeccable taste." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Instead, I turned to Claire, my own smile tight. "Actually, I was just thinking how lucky you are, Claire." She beamed. "Oh, I know." Julian's smirk faltered for half a second. And I knew I had struck a nerve. The waiter returned with the check, and Daniel came back just in time to grab it. "It's on me," he said cheerfully. Julian clapped him on the back. "You're a good man, Daniel." I nearly choked on the irony. The end of the night. As we stepped outside, the cool night air was a relief against my flushed skin. Daniel wrapped an arm around me, pressing a kiss to my temple. "That was fun, right?" I forced a smile. "Yeah. Great night." Claire turned to me, her expression warm. "We should do this again sometime." I swallowed hard. Before I could respond, Julian's voice cut through the night. "Yes," he said smoothly. "We definitely should." His eyes met mine, and I knew what he meant. This wasn't over. Not yet. The moment of no return. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the sounds of clinking glasses and murmured conversations around us. The air in the restaurant suddenly felt thick, suffocating. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table as I willed myself to stay calm. I had two choices. Let it slide, as I had done before, swallowing my discomfort and pretending everything was fine. Or stop this, right here, right now. Enough was enough. I took a steadying breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, loud enough for Daniel and Julian's wife, Claire, to hear, I said, "Julian, I don't think it's appropriate for you to talk to me like that." Silence. The lively buzz of the restaurant faded into the background as an uneasy stillness settled over our table. Daniel's head snapped up, his brows knitting together in confusion. Claire blinked, her wine glass hovering midair. And Julian? His smirk vanished, his body stiffening as realization dawned on him. I had just broken the unspoken rule of his twisted game. I had dragged his behavior into the light. The deflection. Daniel frowned. "What, Julian?" Julian let out a forced laugh, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It was just a joke." I held his gaze, refusing to let him get away with it this time. It didn't feel like one. A flicker of something dark passed through his eyes. Annoyance? Anger? Fear? For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. Claire's brow furrowed as she looked between us. "Julian?" Her voice was hesitant, uncertain, but there was something else beneath it, something sharper. Suspicion. Daniel turned to me, concern etched across his face. "Lily, are you okay?" I swallowed hard. The words were right there, pressing against my lips, but speaking them felt like stepping off a cliff. I took a shaky breath. "No. I'm not." The confrontation. Daniel's expression darkened. "What's going on?" Julian exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair as if he were the victim in this situation. "Come on, Lily, don't do this." "Do what?" Claire's voice was sharper now, her eyes narrowing as she looked at him. Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to catch it. That was all I needed. I turned to Claire, my voice steady. "Julian has been saying inappropriate things to me for a while now. He sent me messages, crossed boundaries. And tonight? He took it too far." Claire stiffened. The color drained from her face, but her expression was unreadable. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel turned to Julian, his voice cold and measured. "Is this true?" Julian let out another forced laugh, but this time, it was hollow. "Lily, I think you're misunderstanding." "No." I cut him off, my voice firm. "I'm not." The table felt smaller, the walls of the restaurant closing in. Other diners continued their meals, oblivious to the storm brewing in our corner of the room. Julian's face twisted in frustration, but I could see it, the flicker of panic in his eyes. He knew he was losing control of the narrative. And men like Julian hated that. The breaking point. Claire's hand tightened around her wine glass. "Let me see your phone." Julian turned to her, his mask of charm cracking. "Claire, don't be ridiculous." Her voice was steel. "Now." A muscle in his jaw twitched. For the first time, he looked trapped. Daniel shifted beside me, his body tense. I could feel his emotions shifting, confusion giving way to something heavier. Something dangerously close to rage. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to Julian's last message and setting it on the table for Claire to see. She stared at the screen. Then, slowly, she lifted her gaze to her husband. Julian. Just his name. But the way she said it, it was the sound of something breaking. Julian reached for her hand. "Claire, I." She pulled away. The tension at the table was unbearable, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on all of us. Finally, Daniel turned to me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I met his eyes, my throat tightening. "Because I didn't want to ruin your friendship. Because I didn't know if you'd believe me. Because I was scared of making things worse." I could have said any of those things, but in the end, I settled for the truth. "I didn't want to hurt you." Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might shatter. Then, slowly, he turned back to Julian. "Get out." Julian stiffened. "What? You heard me." Daniel's voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the fury beneath it. Claire was already standing, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm leaving." Julian stood too, reaching for her, but she stepped back. "Don't touch me." For the first time all night, Julian looked truly afraid. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. He had done this to himself. The aftermath. Julian and Claire left without another word. Silence hung between Daniel and me as we sat there, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on us. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Lily." His voice was hoarse. "I'm so sorry." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back. "It's not your fault. I should have noticed." I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Now you know." He exhaled heavily, his fingers tightening around mine. "Yeah. Now I know." The waiter arrived, hesitating when he saw our expressions. "Would you like the check?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah. We're done here." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I finally was. The weight of truth. That night, after the disaster of the double date, I sat on the edge of our bed, my fingers twisting in my lap. The room was dimly lit, the only sound the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel stood near the window, his back to me, his shoulders tense. I had just told him everything. Everything I had held inside for weeks. I watched his reflection in the glass, waiting for his reaction. His fists clenched at his sides. His jaw was tight, a muscle ticking as he processed my words. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. When he finally turned around, his eyes were sharp, dark with an emotion I couldn't quite name. He crossed a line with my wife. His voice was low, controlled, but there was something dangerous simmering beneath it. "He's going to regret that." I exhaled, the weight of my confession lifting, but another weight settling in its place. Daniel believed me. I had never doubted that he would, but hearing the certainty in his voice, the unwavering support, made something deep inside me ache. I wasn't alone in this. But now, there would be consequences. The reckoning begins. The next morning, Daniel went to work earlier than usual. He kissed me goodbye, lingering just a little longer than normal, his thumb brushing over my cheek. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been the night before. I nodded. "I will be." He studied me for a moment before nodding, then left, his expression unreadable. I spent the morning in a daze, my mind replaying everything over and over. What would happen now? Would Julian retaliate? Would he try to twist the truth? I had no idea. But I didn't have to wait long to find out. By noon, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, he's in HR." My heart pounded. Another buzz. Daniel, apparently, I wasn't the first woman he made uncomfortable. I exhaled sharply, gripping my phone tighter. So it wasn't just me. The thought made my stomach turn. How many others had been subjected to Julian's unwanted attention? How many had stayed silent, afraid of the consequences? And now, his charming mask was finally cracking. The fall of Julian Carter. Later that evening, Daniel filled me in on everything. The moment he walked into the office that morning, he had gone straight to HR. No hesitation, no second thoughts. I told them exactly what happened, he said, his expression hard. And then they told me something that made my blood run cold. I swallowed. What? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. 2 other women had already filed complaints. But they never had enough to formally discipline him. I stared at him. And now? Daniel's eyes darkened. Now they do. HR had wasted no time calling Julian into their office. And from what Daniel had heard, it wasn't pretty. Julian had tried to brush it off, just like he had the night before. It was a misunderstanding. A joke taken the wrong way. But this time, no one was buying it. Too many stories. Too many women. Too much evidence. His charm, his effortless confidence, it all crumbled under the weight of the truth. By the end of the day, Julian Carter was placed on indefinite leave pending an investigation. And just like that, the man who had always walked through the office with an air of untouchable arrogance was now a cautionary tale. The aftermath. I should have felt relieved. But as I sat there, listening to Daniel recount the details, all I felt was exhaustion. "You okay?" Daniel asked, reaching across the table for my hand. I nodded, but he saw through it. "Talk to me," he urged. I hesitated, then exhaled. "It's just. I spent so long questioning myself. Wondering if I was imagining things, if I was overreacting." Daniel's grip tightened. "You weren't. I know that now," I admitted. "But it's scary how easily I doubted myself." His expression softened. "You shouldn't have had to go through this alone." Tears burned at the back of my eyes. I was afraid of what would happen. Afraid of what it might do to you, your friendship, your job. Daniel shook his head. "Julian was never my friend. And any job that would tolerate someone like him isn't worth having." Emotion swelled in my chest. I had always known Daniel was a good man. But this moment, this unwavering support, this refusal to let me carry the burden alone, proved it more than anything else. Julian had crossed a line. But Daniel? He had drawn a line in the sand. One that no one would ever cross again. Healing and moving forward. Over the next few days, the office buzzed with whispers. Julian's absence was glaring. People exchanged hushed conversations in hallways, speculation running wild. But I didn't care about the rumors. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. The tension that had weighed on my shoulders was gone. And Daniel was my anchor through it all. One night, as we lay in bed, he pulled me close, his fingers tracing soothing circles on my back. "I'm proud of you," he murmured. I buried my face in his chest. "For what?" "For standing up for yourself. For speaking your truth." I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. I had spent so long feeling small, doubting myself. But now? Now I felt something else. Stronger. Lighter. Free. Julian Carter had lost his power over me. And I would never let anyone take it again.